Live from the 90.3 KRNU studio, you're listening to Rebel Radio with your host, Jeremy Davis.
And I'd like to thank you for tuning in. You're listening to 90.3 KRNU right here in Lincoln, Nebraska, and we've got a special edition of Rebel Radio coming at you today to kind of finish up these summer sessions of the show. But I was able to sit down and interview singer-songwriter Ross Cooper. So I'm going to play that for you today, as well as the exclusive acoustic performance that he gave us. So without further ado, let's get into that interview right now. All right, so this is a Rebel Radio special edition here with me, your host, Jeremy Davis, as always, and we have got a special guest with us today, Texas singer-songwriter Ross Cooper. Ross, it's good to have you.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Well, glad you could make the trip up.
Oh, yeah.
How was the trip up?
It was good. Nashville's 10 hours from everywhere, so we're 10 or 11 from Lincoln. We got a head start last night and went on the other side of Kansas City before we stopped and got a hotel, so it's been pretty easy. It's good. It's good. Nobody's really driving at 1 or 2 in the morning on a Thursday night anyway, right. So yeah, it was easy.
Well, I'm going to kind of get into some background stuff on you and then just kind of go from there. But, so you're originally from Lubbock, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I was born and raised in Lubbock, and then went to school outside of Lubbock for a year. Went to South Plains College in Levelland and studied music, and then was still just kind of too close to home, so ended up finishing up at Texas A&M. But yeah, Lubbock is always home base for me. It's always gonna be that for sure. I'm really proud of being from Lubbock.
What it seems like is there something in the water in Lubbock? Because it seems like there's so many great musicians coming out of there, and it's always been that way.
Yeah, there's got to be. Inherently, it's kind of been a mecca for a lot of art and music, especially, but I've kind of heard it describe it as an island surrounded by dirt. There's nothing really close to it. You have to travel, a good 3.5, 4 hours to really get anywhere. And if you are somebody who's artistic or you like music, there's a lot of time to yourself, basically. But I think kind of that desolation kind of fosters that culture of a camaraderie between songwriters, and definitely kind of a rich musical history. But you're right, it goes back, past the obvious, Buddy Holly and Waylon being from Littlefield, but Joe Ely, the Flatlanders. It's such a, and then you fast forward and not even that far, and you have guys like Pat Green who came from Tech, and Wade Bowen who came from Tech, and songwriter Mondo Signs who went to Tech, and William Clark Green, Josh Abbott, all these guys. And then now there's this, it's not even a resurgence of Lubbock talent because it's always been there. But right now, I think especially you have a really cool collective of guys that are doing really cool things that are all a little different too. You past Josh Abbott and William Clark Green, you have Flatland Cavalry, who we were talking about earlier, and Randall King is doing great things. My friend Daniel Markham, who now lives in Denton, just put out he has a rock and roll band, and he just put out a new record, and that record's awesome. Charlie Shafter's putting out a new, Lubbock's a really cool place right now, and I think it's getting a lot of attention, hopefully, that it deserves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It seems like through the years there's been I've heard it described as the classes of the blue light.
That's right. Yep.
Could you go into a little bit more on that?
So I'd always kind of looked up to the guys that were a little older, and I think when I was kind of the first bar I'd played in Lubbock was Blue Light, and we were playing there on Tuesday and Wednesday nights in this cover band. And I was hanging out with the guys that were a little older. So my class, I was like the little brother, I feel like, to, William Clark Green and Brandon Adams. And at that time, Thrift Store Cowboys were in Lubbock, and they were one of the coolest things that there was coming out of Lubbock. They were a band that worked their butts off and were on the national scene. Red Shahan. You know, Russell was on. He was in that too. And then, you know, I think age-wise, I probably should have been in the class right after, because all those guys have, you know, at least I think 4 years on me. But that's just kind of how it fell. When I was living in College Station, I was coming back to Lubbock every summer. You know, but yeah, it is. It's the Blue Light class, and it's usually started because of the songwriter night. You know, it's the people coming out, you know, week after week, which is it's really strange because I guess I'd always kind of missed it again because I was living in College Station, but I always went to it, you know. But that's kind of what determines I feel like the next class is. It's just the next kind of generation or whatever, or class of songwriters. And Blue Light is such a great home base, and it gives people an opportunity to woodshed songs and see what works, see what doesn't, and be surrounded by songwriters that care about a craft, you know.
Well, that's really cool that you have that. I mean, I've heard so much about it. I'd like to eventually see a show there.
Yeah, I mean, you should. Yeah, just go stay at my parents' house. They'd love to have you. They have people there all the time. But it's cool. It's you know, I'm biased, but you know, thank God we've had a really, really busy year, or last kind of 2 years. But Blue Light is always still one of my top 2 or 3 favorite venues, period. That room always sounds great. There's people that go there to listen to a band that they might not even know, you know, who they are. They do a great job of bringing great artists and great bands through. So that's what makes that place special. You know.
Well, kind of shifting gears here a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about your career in rodeo because, as someone that has grown up with it myself, I've seen a lot of publications and a lot of like interviews. Get it kind of? They say you were a bronc rider, but they don't.
Yeah.
Saddle bronc, bareback. There's
right.
not
The vocab. You know, it's interesting because that's right. A lot of them. It's funny because I'm in a place where rodeo is kind of a foreign concept, and being a cowboy is there. I mean, there's no cowboys there, you know, and a lot of them just kind of lack the vocabulary, and we've had to kind of have do crash courses before, and that was kind of something, you know, with my PR team, like just talking about like we had to do kind of a mini course of talking about the right language and the right vocabulary. But no, I started riding saddle bronc when I was like 13, and then I was high school rodeoing, and then just kind of threw in bareback riding to make a run at like the all around, and the bareback riding kind of took off, and the saddle bronc riding, I could kind of scrape at one a little bit, but I wasn't a good saddle bronc rider. And so rodeoed through high school and through college, and was going to a bunch of pro rodeos, and you know, doing pretty good there for a while, and then fought my head a lot, honestly. You know, when I was up, I was up, and when I was down, man, I was down. And then right after I guess right before I graduated college, I tore my knee again, and I was kind of fighting my head, and I took some time off and went to the college finals and rode just kind of awful. Just kind of rode awful, and was, again, just, there was a lot of kind of life changes that were coming up, and the biggest one was graduating school and like figuring out what I was going to do immediately after. And it was never really an intention to quit rodeoing. I didn't really know how Tennessee worked. I figured that there's got to be some kind of a pumpkin rolling down the road or something that I could still get on horses. And so I brought my rigging bag and my saddle and a farrier box, and have hardly used any of it. But yeah, it was kind of one of those graduate college, and then I wanted to be in a place, especially, you know, that I was kind of fighting my head on the rodeo side, that I wanted to be in a place like Nashville. There was a lot of allure to it, and I was like, you know what, if it sucks, I can give it a year, you know. And then that was it's almost 6 years ago. Pretty crazy. Wow. Time flies, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I know that a lot of my listeners for the show are pretty deeply rooted in rodeo. Like
that's awesome.
They understand everything. I mean, coming from the western part of Nebraska, you're going to run it.
Yeah. Well, we went to. I remember being young, and there was I was riding around with my brother, and he was traveling with some guys from like Guyman, and we went to this rodeo, and it was one of the rankest bronc ridings. They had blinds on every bronc that they ran in the chute.
Wow.
These suckers looked like they'd never seen man before, you know. And that was like 13 or 14 maybe at the time. I wasn't getting on bareback horses yet, but I was traveling around with my brother and then just seeing if I could just mount out like re-rides or whatever, you know, just see if I could just get on something. And I remember being there and just being like, I don't know if I want to put my saddle on any one of these suckers.
I think I'm going to pass this time.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of touched on it earlier, but the whole cowboy culture, it just seems like there's not, I mean, there is some songwriters that are still kind of singing songs about cowboys, but it's kind of few and far between. What made you kind of want to step into that?
For a long time, there was this weird split, because I was playing music and rodeoing at the same time. But I'll be the first one to tell you, you know, like I love Chris Ledoux, and I love Ian Tyson, I love Tom Russell. But I was listening to like indie rock stuff too. Like I love rock and roll, and I love weird indie rock that nobody's ever heard of. I like folk songs, and I never wanted to have to choose. You know, like I think I've always tried to write just exactly what I know, and if it comes out as a rock song, it comes out as a rock and roll song. But it was really hard to write a rodeo song for a while, and it's not. I never really think I made the conscious decision of like, okay, I'm going to put out a rodeo record, because honestly, you know, aside from that being the title track, you know, it's kind of a character. I Rode the Wild Horses is it's a character-based song.
Right.
And I feel like it sets the tone for the record really well. But my dad stayed on my butt for like a long time, just kind of, you know, soft jabs, kind of like, oh, you know, when are you going to write a rodeo song? When are you going to write a rodeo song? I could write 50 to 100 songs, and there for a long time, like over Christmas or something, if I have my guitar, he'd want to hear just like Bucking Horse Rider, you know, from Corbel Hunt or Ian Tyson. And so it was one of those, like, I didn't want to write, I was kind of almost scared of it to write one, because I wanted it to be from a place that, you know, come from me as an artist. And man, I like darker sounding stuff. I like, you know, I like stuff that, like, I like murder ballads, and I like dark sounding stuff. And so I Rode the Wild Horses is honestly kind of one of the first rodeo songs that I've really kind of real true rodeo songs that I've written. But it was also a great kind of a great catalyst for a couple of, you know, songs that kind of fall in that same vein. Like there's a song on the record called Cowboys and Indians, you know, and that kind of I'll leave the listeners can listen, but it's a pretty easy song to figure out what it's about. But
well, while you're there, I had just before the record came out, I had a conversation with someone about when I first got into Lincoln. Everyone was just dressed different. I mean, me coming from the western part of the state, being around cowboys my entire life, I came to Lincoln like, oh, they don't dress quite the same. And then here in the last probably year, I've seen a lot of people. It's been kind of a weird change almost. And your song just hits the nail on the head with people just kind of wanting to be that. Yeah,
well, you know, there's kind of a line that I think that you have to be careful about, you know, walking, kind of a precarious line, because on one hand, the resurgence of and preservation of cowboy culture and Western culture is something to be excited about and be very, very proud of. But the song that we wrote, you know, Cowboys and Indians, was, you know, like if you're living in Nashville, like this is my experience. If you're living in Nashville, you know, I went from wearing a hat every single day to not wearing a hat there for a while, you know, and like, and I know that sounds like just kind of trivial and who cares, but for the reason that when I got there, like if somebody was wearing a cowboy hat, it was like the black straw, like Tim McGraw type of hat thing, and which is fine if you want to wear that. But the thing is, like, a lot of people that don't really know any better think that that's like, oh, that guy's a cowboy.
Right.
And it's like,
right.
Obviously that's not a cowboy. So I think that a preservation of you know, Western heritage is always great, and if more people are kind of even jumping on a bandwagon, great. But it's also better to see it done in the right way,
Right.
you know. And man, I don't know anybody that didn't want to be a cowboy at one point when they grew up.
That's
you know?
exactly right. Yeah,
So.
absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about the album. Who produced it? Where was it recorded?
Yeah, Eric Massey produced it. It was recorded at his studio. It's called the Casino. It's in East Nashville. So some records that I was really gravitating towards. I started noticing that they were all coming from this guy. He had produced all these albums, and that was kind of where I saw, the textures and tones and production behind a lot of these albums was really cool. But those albums, it was an Andrew Combs record that I was listening to, this guy, Raylan Baxter, Robert Ellis, these really cool albums that were coming out of East Nashville, and then come to find out Eric Massey was producing them. And I went on Facebook and figured out who we had, who we knew in common, and started asking around. And I knew one person in common enough to where I could ask her if she would put us in touch. And so she did, and we got together and we had some coffee and we were talking about music. And I really didn't think that he would bite. I was just I was more excited that he would would sit down with me. Mm-hmm. And he was like, "Yeah, man, so let's do this." And it was became a really realistic thing. And which, in and of itself is pretty scary sometimes. But it was a kind of a dream come true in a lot of ways. I had a very, very, very short list of who I wanted to work with, who I wanted to produce the album. And I really kind of in the back of my head was trying to come up with a plan C, because I had two guys kind of in mind. And Eric was at the top of the list. So man, it was, when he agreed to it, it was okay, now it's gotta
Right.
I know I know the music's gonna sound good, so let's make sure the songs are there.
Right.
And
that kind of brings me to the next point. On social media, one of your posts talking about the album was you by no means put out a safe record. And I hadn't really thought about that until I saw that post. But what do you mean by what's a safe record in your mind?
Well, it fits because it doesn't fit the album in a lot of ways. We've been able to play some shows in the Texas country market, but the album went to Americana. If you listen to the album front to back, I think hopefully it kind of tells a story. But if you take the third song and the 11th song and put them side by side, they sound nothing alike. Mm-hmm. We took some big risks musically. There's some songs that sound like kind of traditional country songs. There's a song called Damn Love that sounds like a traditional country song, and then there's a song called Me Only that sounds like a garage rock, just a nasty garage rock song. And it's kind of freeing in a lot of ways that everybody's going to complain. I think a lot of people do complain about streaming, Spotify, etc. For good reason too. I mean, honestly, for good reason. But what that does is it frees up a lot of artists, because I feel like a lot of people don't feel like they have to always chase radio singles or whatever it is. But I wanted to put out a record that I was really, 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 really proud of, and put out exactly what I know. And I have, some songs that first of all, my favorite thing to do is write songs. And I do have some songs that would probably be a little more palatable for the everyday person than, Exhibit A or whatever on the record. But it was okay, if we're going to do this album, and it's going to be this big album with this producer that I might not ever get to work with again, then we kind of got to throw caution to the wind, and I got to do you have to go with your gut.
Right.
You have to go. That was kind of it. That was honestly, when the album came out, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how it would be received, and Thank God. It's been it's been good, and everything's been. I feel like every show has been building, and it's great. But I think that there is a way of putting out safe records, and you see it a lot too. Like where a lot of it is no matter the genre, a lot of it just kind of sounds like cookie cutter or whatever. And it was definitely kind of taking those chances musically. Man, it's scary. There's a big risk. Because as silly as it sounds, like it just kind of comes down to like, oh man, what if people hate it? Well, for us, for artists, I mean that's it's everything. Yeah. It's everything. So yeah, it's also with that though. I think it's made. I feel a little bit more, even more so confident in my writing, and it's okay to kind of step out on that ledge, and push the envelope,
right. And it seemed to work for you because
thank you.
It's been one of my favorite records
man,
of 2018. I
have
much. Been wanting to tell you that.
Oh, dude, thank you very much, man.
And appreciate anyone who listens to my show knows that I keep coming back, keep coming back. That this is one of the best albums that has came out this year.
Thank you.
So.
I appreciate that. It's pretty awesome. Like this part of the country. I guess Nebraska's the Midwest, right?
Yep.
Yeah, duh. But we've been playing the Midwest quite a bit this year. We've been doing Arkansas and Missouri and Iowa. This is our second time in Lincoln. And it's awesome coming up here. First of all, it's beautiful country. But it can be kind of so like what, man, it's like West Texas. Like, what the heck is out here? Like, right. Is anything out here? Like, is anybody going to show up to these shows? And I feel like people in the Midwest y'all are really hungry for music,
yeah,
and so people come out to shows. It's great, and that's been we've been seeing the same people show up at shows, like the same people that we saw in we played Lawrence, Kansas. Okay, so the same people that we saw in like Lawrence, Kansas, we saw in like they came to Joplin, Missouri. So that's a really cool thing. You don't always see that,
right?
So.
And I think that is one thing about the Midwest. We're so hungry for new stuff. I mean, in the Oklahoma and Texas scene, there's been this music that's been red dirt, Texas country. You have everything that hasn't been mainstream. Where here you don't have that.
Yeah,
and I think Spotify's been a great thing for that.
Totally.
Because it has
absolutely.
It's given the entire Midwest kind of like, oh, there's more stuff other than just what's on the radio.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, that's nail on the head. There's talking about Oklahoma, man, there's some guys in Oklahoma right now that are phenomenal. Mm-hmm. I mean, Fulbright, I think John Fulbright he didn't, I know that there were predecessors before him, but, you have John Fulbright and, John Moreland,
right.
That guy, like everything he puts out, just it's so great. This guy, Levi Parham, I think I'm pretty positive that's his name. I just kind of found out about him. Like that guy's great. Like there's, but you're right. That Spotify, the related artists thing on Spotify, it can be very, very, very
right.
helpful of finding out about those artists, and then all of a sudden they're in your town,
mm-hmm.
and if you use it as a tool, then it gets people out to shows. I live under a rock sometimes, and it's got me out. It's got me out to shows that I heard whatever band on Spotify and dug into them, and then found out they were playing in Nashville, and went out to one of those. Go out to those shows, and it's like that would never happen.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't. That you're right. That's the huge advantage of streaming. Yeah, it's a cool deal.
And I think there's more and more. Well, like I always say that Rebel Radio is kind of the first red dirt geared show in kind of this area,
mm-hmm.
and now I think the two country stations here in Lincoln are talking about implementing like kind of their own specialty show too.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to see that, because when any of these guys come to town, they sell out a lot. When the big guys like Turnpike and Randy Rogers, all those guys come, it always sells out. So it just shows that there's that
right. If you build it,
there's that want.
Totally, and that's great. That's on the most basic level of it, man. It's always good when you can go play shows. It's always good when there's people that want to hear you play shows. Like,
right.
Man, it's a cool thing.
So, yeah, I can't tell you thank you enough for doing this.
Man, thanks for having me.
It's been fun just sitting here in the cave talking about music.
Shoot, yeah, it's not a bad way to spend a Friday or whatever today is.
So go check out Ross Cooper's I Rode the Wild Horses, out now everywhere.
Yep, everywhere music is. It used to be everywhere music is sold, and now it's everywhere music is sold online. I don't remember the last time I went out to go buy a CD.
Right. It's just, and like the pre-orders, it just puts it on your phone.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, totally.
It's great. So, well, I thank you again.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Do you have time for a song?
Yep, sure do.
So there you have it, this week's special edition of Rebel Radio. Big thanks goes out to Ross Cooper for letting that happen. Go check out his music and that album, I Rode the Wild Horses. And go drop us a like on our social media pages at Rebel Radio KRNU. I'm planning on dropping the link to the interview at some point so you can listen to it again. But until next time, thanks for listening, and Roy, sing us on out.